The man is hiding in a cave, 16 miles outside Jerusalem. He has no throne, no army, no home. His own king wants him dead. And in the dark, instead of planning an escape, he starts writing a poem. That's strange enough on its own. But here's what should really stop you. We still sing that poem. 3,000 years later, in languages that didn't exist yet, in countries he never heard of, people are still opening their mouths and saying the exact words a hunted man once whispered into a cave wall. 73 psalms carry David's name. Most of them come with no story attached, just a title, a Psalm of David, and nothing else. But 13 of them do come with a story. 13 psalms name the exact day, the exact terror, the exact humiliation that produced them. Then, if you pull those 13 out of the book and read them in the order David actually lived them, not the order some editor filed them centuries later, you don't get a devotional. You get a man's entire life, told from the inside, while it was still happening to him. Start where he started. The cave at Adullam. David is somewhere in his 20s. He has just lied his way through a Philistine palace, drooling on his own beard to survive. And now he's run to ground in a cave near his hometown, 16 miles from a throne he was promised and doesn't have. 1 Samuel says his brothers find him there. So does everyone in debt, everyone in distress, everyone with nowhere else to go. 400 men, none of them soldiers, all of them refugees. This is not the origin story of a king. This is the origin story of a fugitive with a following of other fugitives. 2 psalms come out of that cave. Psalm 142 says it plainly. I cry out to the Lord with my voice. With my voice to the Lord I make my supplication. I pour out my complaint before him. And then, 4 verses later, the line that should stop you, no one cares for my soul. Not few people, no one. The Hebrew word underneath soul there is nephesh, and it doesn't mean some ghostly inner spirit floating above the body. Nephesh means the throat, the breath, the whole hungry, thirsty, frightened, physical self. When David says, no one cares for his nephesh, he means no one is watching to see if he eats, if he's found, if he lives through the night. That word shows up again and again across these 13 psalms. It's not decoration, it's the thread. Psalm 57 comes from the same cave, maybe the same week, and it moves somewhere Psalm 142 doesn't dare go yet. In the shadow of your wings I will make my refuge, until these calamities have passed by. Refuge, twice in one breath. He's not pretending the danger isn't real. He's naming exactly where he's hiding, under something, someone, bigger than the cave. That's the first thing worth noticing about David's Psalms, and it will hold true for all 13. He never spiritualizes the fear away. He names it. Then he goes looking for somewhere to put it. Some scholars link a third psalm, Psalm 142's near cousin, to a second cave, Gedi, an oasis near the Dead Sea where Saul himself once walked in to relieve himself, unaware David and his men were hiding in the same cave, close enough to reach out and cut a corner off the king's robe. David didn't kill him. He could have ended the entire chase in one motion, and instead he cut a piece of cloth and let Saul walk out alive. That's not the reflex of a coward. It's the discipline of a man who has already decided, somewhere in these cave psalms, that his safety is not his to seize by force. Whatever he had settled with God in Psalm 142 and Psalm 57, it held even when the opportunity for revenge was standing 3 feet away with its back turned. The betrayals come next, and they're worse than Saul, because they come from his own side. 1 Samuel 22 tells you exactly what happened. A man named Doeg the Edomite watched David receive help from the priest Ahimelech and told Saul. Saul had 85 priests executed for it, an entire town of them, along with the women, children, even the livestock. Psalm 52 is David's response, and it isn't polite. Why do you boast in evil, you mighty man? The goodness of God endures continually. Your tongue devises destruction, like a sharp razor, working deceitfully. The Hebrew word for tongue there, lashon, carries the sense of something that can be sharpened into a weapon, and that's exactly the accusation. Doeg didn't lift a sword. He talked, and 85 men died because of what he said. David doesn't pretend that's a small thing. He names the man's sin as violence, because it was. Then the Ziphites, his own tribesmen, people of Judah, David's own people, go to Saul twice and tell him exactly where David is hiding. Psalm 54 is short, almost clipped, like a man too tired for a long poem. Strangers have risen up against me, and oppressors have sought after my life. They have not set God before them. Not enemies. Strangers. People who should have known him and didn't. That's a different kind of wound than a sword, and David writes it like one. Which brings you to the strangest chapter in the whole story, Gath. 1 Samuel 21 tells it almost too plainly to be comfortable. David, out of options, runs to the Philistines, to Gath, home of Goliath's family, the last city on earth that should have welcomed him. The servants of King Achish recognize him immediately. So David does the only thing left. He acts insane, scratches at the doors of the gate, lets saliva run down his beard, a king's anointed successor, humiliating himself on a foreign floor to survive one more day. 2 psalms come out of that week, and they are almost unrecognizable as coming from the same man. Psalm 56 is raw. In God I have put my trust. I will not be afraid. What can flesh do to me? But look closer, and the fear is still there, just underneath. All day they twist my words. They gather together. They hide. They mark my steps. This isn't a man who has stopped being afraid. This is a man choosing, in real time, sentence by sentence, to trust anyway. And then Psalm 34. Written, most scholars believe, immediately after the humiliation at Gath, opens with words that should not be possible from that scene. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. And a few lines later, the phrase that became one of the most quoted in the whole Psalter, taste and see that the Lord is good. The Hebrew word ta'am means taste, but also discernment. The same root sits behind the Hebrew word for judgment, the capacity to weigh and know something firsthand, not by hearsay. David isn't telling you what he's heard about God. He's telling you what he tasted, on the floor of Gath, with spit on his beard. That's not distance from the humiliation. That's the humiliation, transmuted, still warm. Notice, too, what the psalm's title actually says. When he pretended madness before Abimelech, who drove him away. He didn't wait until the danger passed to write it. He wrote it about the very moment he was still ashamed of. The acting, the drooling, the trick that worked but cost him something to perform. Most people bury the memory of their worst improvisation. David turned his into the most quoted invitation to worship in the whole book. That's not spin. That's a man refusing to let the worst afternoon of his life be the only thing that afternoon meant. David becomes king. You would expect the cave psalms to stop there. They don't, because the next enemy isn't Saul, and it isn't a foreign king. It's David. 2 Samuel 11 and 12 tell it without softening a single detail. David sees Bathsheba, sends for her, and when she becomes pregnant, arranges for her husband Uriah to die in battle to cover it up. The prophet Nathan walks into the palace, tells David a story about a rich man who steals a poor man's only lamb, and waits for David to condemn the man in the story before saying 4 words that changed everything. You are the man. Psalm 51 is what came after that sentence landed, and it reads differently than every psalm before it, because for the first time, the enemy isn't out there. Against you, you only, have I sinned, and done this evil in your sight. Not Saul, not Doeg, not the Ziphites, him. The Hebrew asks for something specific, lev tahor, a clean heart, and ruach nakon, a steadfast spirit, literally a spirit that is fixed, established, no longer sliding. This is the same David who once wrote, "No one cares for my nephesh," from a cave. Now he's the one who nearly destroyed his own. The fugitive who spent years running from a king now needs rescuing from himself, and he knows it, and he says so, without a single sentence of self-defense. There's a detail worth sitting with here. Every other psalm on this list came with an excuse built into the circumstances. Saul was hunting him, Doeg had betrayed him, the Ziphites had sold him out. A reasonable person could read those 13 years and conclude David was mostly a man other people did things to. Psalm 51 removes that reading entirely. Uriah didn't wrong David, David wronged Uriah, and then arranged his death to bury the evidence. There is no cave to blame here, no foreign king, no informant. Just a man, a prophet's sentence, and the sudden, total absence of anywhere else to point. If this is opening something up for you, if you're seeing the shape of these psalms differently than you did 10 minutes ago, subscribe to Plain and Simple. Leave a comment below and share this with someone who needs it. That's genuinely how more people find this channel. There's one psalm left, and it belongs at the end for a reason. David is old now. He has survived Saul, Gath, his own worst sin, and now his own son Absalom has raised an army and is marching on Jerusalem to take the throne by force. 2 Samuel 15 describes the scene without mercy. David leaving his own capital on foot, weeping, his head covered, climbing the Mount of Olives barefoot while his people weep around him. This is the same road in some sense that the young fugitive once ran down. Different decade. Same fear, except now it's his own child holding the sword. Psalm 3 comes from that flight. It opens exactly where you'd expect. Lord, how they have increased who trouble me. Many are they who rise up against me. Many are they who say of me, there is no help for him in God. That's the same voice from the cave, surrounded, outnumbered, watched by people waiting for him to fall apart. But then comes the line that should stop you cold if you followed this man from Adullam to Gath to his own worst sin and back out again. I lay down and slept. I woke again, for the Lord sustained me. An old king, hunted by his own child, sleeping soundly enough to wake up the next morning. Not because the danger was smaller. Absalom's army was real. The threat was as lethal as anything Saul ever sent after him. But somewhere between the cave at Adullam and this hillside, the fear stopped requiring a performance. He didn't need to convince himself he wasn't afraid. He just knew, by now, exactly where to put it. That's the whole shape of these 13 psalms. Read in order, instead of scattered across a book. It isn't the story of a man who got braver. Bravery would mean the fear went away. His didn't. What changed is what he did with it. Every single time, in a cave, on a foreign floor, in front of a prophet who'd just named his sin out loud, on a hillside fleeing his own child. He kept bringing the same terrified nephesh back to the same place, until eventually the place was more real to him than the terror. Notice also what the book's editors did with all of this centuries later, when they finally arranged the Psalter into the order we read today. They didn't put these 13 psalms in a row. They scattered them. Psalm 3 near the front, Psalm 142 buried deep in the back third of the book. Psalm 51 tucked among songs that have nothing to do with Bathsheba at all. That wasn't carelessness. The Psalms were compiled as a hymn book for a worshiping community, organized by theme and use, not as a biography. Which means the autobiography was always there, hidden in plain sight, in 13 small captions most readers skip past on the way to the poem underneath. You have to go looking for the life to find it, and once you do, the poems you've read 100 times stop sounding like general spiritual advice and start sounding like something closer to a diary, written by a man who kept surviving things that should have ended him, in the exact order he survived them. You've probably read Psalm 51 before, maybe more than once. The words about a clean heart are famous enough to be printed on things. But most people read it as a standalone confession, disconnected from a young man's terror in a cave 16 miles away, disconnected from the floor of Gath, disconnected from an old man asleep on a hillside years later. Read together. In order, they're not 13 separate poems. They're one long conversation between a frightened man and the God he kept returning to, decade after decade, failure after failure, until the fear itself became the place where he learned to trust. That's worth sitting with tonight, not the version of faith that never feels afraid, but the version that keeps bringing the fear back to the same God anyway, cave after cave, until sleep comes easy even on the worst night of your life. If this reached you tonight, help it reach someone else. Subscribe to Plain and Simple. Leave a comment, even one word. Share this with someone who's been carrying a question they haven't known how to ask. That is genuinely how more people find this channel. Keep us in your prayers. God bless you.